Hi, this is Dave Kettlewell, and welcome to Medical Matters. You have landed on the 5th in a series of 6 shows on alternative medicine. And today our topics are perhaps some of the biggest in America, which include insulin resistance, diabetes, and cholesterol. Of course, we're talking today with Dr. Keith Unger from the Center for Natural Medicine. These are very intriguing shows. Thanks for joining us. We're talking today again with Dr. Keith Unger about some topics that you've probably read an awful lot about in magazines and newspapers, and also seen some things on TV. We're talking about insulin resistance, how that might relate to then diabetes, and of course obesity is tied in with that too. And then of course for all of us that are over 40, cholesterol. But you're going to hear a different perspective on these stories today. Up until today on Medical Matters, most of our guests have been physicians, MDs and DOs, but we wanted to bring in the perspective of alternative medicine because you, the viewer, asked me to do this. And so we looked for someone to bring in who has the ability to discuss these topics, and we brought in Dr. Unger. So thank you for a fresh look on America's medical problems.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. Well, we know that about half of young people are obese, and a little bit less than half of Americans are obese. It's an epidemic with links to diabetes, with links to heart disease, lower quality of life, damage to joints, cardiovascular problems, on and on and on. And there is some connection in your mind between this and something called insulin resistance.
Well, you know, we have to realize that insulin resistance is not really a condition, it's more of a process. And what insulin resistance means is that when people have glucose in their blood, let's say they eat a meal and it breaks down into sugar, that glucose has to get into the cell. And so the pancreas secretes out insulin, and it's insulin's job to actually help get the glucose into the cell, to cross that cell membrane barrier. And a lot of times with insulin resistance is what happens is that they have to go through a receptor site, and that receptor site becomes less responsive. And now you can't get the insulin into the cell. So then the pancreas says, wow, we still have a lot of glucose in the blood, let's pump out more insulin and let's try to get more in there. And then in the process what happens is that if you don't utilize that glucose as energy right away, it actually goes into the fat storage.
Now what this looks like to us in the public, we go to our doctor, and we used to, maybe in our 20s, we had a resting blood sugar level of 90. You get a little older, 95, 98, pop over 100, and you're into a pre-diabetic condition, which is also called metabolic disorder, moving towards diabetes, not full-blown diabetes. And this is where that insulin resistance is starting. Why are these receptor sites not functioning correctly, and you're needing more and more insulin to get the job done?
Well, there's a multitude of reasons that can cause that. It can be due to the toxins that may build up into receptors. You have to realize that receptors are basically their configurations on the cell wall, and the actual molecules that come into that receptor site have to fit like a hand in a glove. And basically what happens, those receptor sites can be blocked with toxins, other hormones or something may get in there, foreign hormones from outside the body, which we call xenohormones. They're foreign from outside the body, and they kind of mimic hormones, and they can get inside those receptor cells.
Are we talking about hormones that might be in foods we consume?
Absolutely. Or things that mimic hormones. The molecular structure may be similar, and it gets inside that receptor site, and it can send the wrong signal into the cell.
How might you know that you could potentially be developing insulin resistance?
Well, number one, you want to look at your blood test, fasting blood glucose test. And as you said, as you get above 100, then you're trending toward diabetes, and you're probably in a state of insulin resistance. You also may want to look at your triglyceride levels. That's another indicator that may be that you're in insulin resistance. So we have to realize that in conventional medicine, they wait until you're outside of the pathological blood value ranges before they actually do anything for it, because they're taught that once you're outside of that pathological range, you are now in a disease state. Once you're in a disease state, of course, they're going to put you on some medication. But if you're at 100, and let's say they say above 120 is diabetes after you've had a blood test several times, or your hemoglobin A1C test, which is another test for diabetes, is above 6, then they say now you're diabetic. Well, if you're at 100, 110, and next time 112, then why not do something about it now? Dietary healthy lifestyle changes, give you some nutritional support and supplements that can actually help aid in the process to help balance out the chemistry of the body to actually reverse this process, which it can be done.
A lot of Americans are very frightened by the idea that they might get diabetes. What is diabetes?
Well, diabetes is a condition basically where your blood glucose levels are over 120 after you've taken your blood tests on several occasions. And what happens is that diabetes is a disease that can progress all the way down into gangrene, where you may have to get a limb or foot cut off. And I'm not trying to scare people out there, but that is the truth. And we have to realize that it is a progressive disease. And with diabetes, we have to realize that the blood sugar is out of control. And we can control a lot of these complications that come along with diabetes if we control the blood sugar problem. So we really have to focus in on the blood sugar problems.
In your opinion, is there a link between the consumption of sucrose or sugar through pop or other means, because sugar's in a lot of foods, is there a link, in your opinion, between consumption of sugar and insulin resistance or diabetes?
Well, you know, there is. It's a contributing factor. I'm not going to say it's the thing that caused it. We have to realize that simple carbohydrates break down into sugar too. And once the sugar gets in the body, the real problem is that our body's not able to metabolize it properly. It could be an issue in the gut because glucose metabolism does occur in the gut. It could be at a cellular level. It could be at a transport level. It could be a pancreatic issue. So you have to realize that the blood sugar problems are different things that get it into the cell. And we have to look at each and every one of those to see where is the problem so we can correct that underlying cause.
Consuming candy or pop is a different thing for your body than eating an apple.
Absolutely.
Different from eating a piece of whole wheat bread, unless that bread has a copious amount of sugar on it. How does your body respond to large amounts of sugar in the diet?
Well, it does respond for a while, and we have to realize that our pancreas is a gland that secretes the insulin, and you know, it's just like a well in water. If you keep pumping the well, sooner or later, if you don't replenish it, we don't get rains to replenish the water tables, you're going to run out of water. So if you keep inundating your system with these sugars and simple carbohydrates, sooner or later, some mechanisms in the body start to change, the chemistry starts to change, and it sets you up for insulin resistance, which is ultimately going to lead you down the road to diabetes. And of course, in that process too comes obesity. We know a lot of people who are diabetics who are overweight, and a lot of times that's because the mechanism that if you can't get glucose into the cell, the body immediately puts it into the fat storage tissue, which is the adipose tissue.
There are differing opinions on this in the medical field. I've asked several physicians, is there a direct link between sugar consumption and diabetes? And they say, well, not really, but there is between obesity and diabetes. And of course, there is a link between sugar consumption, copious amounts, and obesity. So it's kind of something where you hear yes, you hear no, but you hear it in different forms. But the bottom line is, some things are happening with Americans' diets today, which are causing problems, which could be setting us up for insulin resistance and diabetes. What's wrong with the diet?
Well, first of all, the diet, number one, is not healthy. We have to realize that, unfortunately, the food industry is into making profits. They're not into making healthy foods, and I should say the commercial ones. And that's America. It's the land of the free and free enterprise. But we have to realize that as humans, we have to realize that those types of diets are not beneficial for us. So eating the junk food, the processed refined carbohydrates is not healthy for us. But day in and day out, parents are bringing these things into their house. Their kids are eating them. The kids start getting caught up. And what happens is that once your chemistry becomes imbalanced, once, you end up in a recurring cycle that you can't get out of it. It's like a hamster running on a little wheel.